Okay, so the next period in the excuse me, the next period in the June 2023 Gemini forecast is starts at June 10th and again goes for about 7 to 10 days. Now there's two elements to this, or there's one element and then a change. Okay, and this is a thing that it's important to keep in mind whenever you're looking at an astrological forecast is the planets don't stop moving. So it depends on at what point you're taking a snapshot of where the planets are. Okay. So with the June 10th, nothing much is changing. Um, what you will find is that you you'll think more about you. This is a really good time for planning your vacation. So it doesn't seem to be a particularly good time um, for kind of working out practical things. And if you have to do practical things, I'm not telling you not to do them. It's just going to require a little bit more effort, or it just means you're going to need to give yourself a little bit more time to get it done. Okay. And then it changes a little bit later on. I'm not sure whether it's like later on in the day or a little bit halfway through that period where it starts out that you do feel like doing different things, but then it switches up where you just kind of go into your imagination, go internal. So for that second time frame, it does have a bit more of that Gemini energy in terms of you want to be a bit more active, but you it's one of those situations where you'll talk about it more than doing it. And that seems to be where that's going from June 10th for about 7 to 10 days. And what's interesting is you get brief flashes of feeling like you're wanting to go out. So I think there's kind of these really short windows where you feel energized. Yeah, I want to go out. It's not just you just talking. And again, it's just something to be aware of. And again, it doesn't mean that that necessarily is speaking to you specifically, but that's the overall feeling of what I'm looking at. Okay. And here's the thing, even if you find that it doesn't apply to you, what you will notice is it's going to make you more observant. And that's one of the things I do love about the astrology is especially when I'm picking out times to do things, it makes me more observant. It makes me a bit more present because I'm like, okay, this is the time to start whatever activity it is. So that's another thing that I do, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, or perhaps at another reading. Is I do a thing called time markers, and what that is I take a person's natal chart and then I take the current transits, and I always relocate the chart because it's got to be from where the person is, and people will discuss that, or astrologers discuss that back and forth. But for me, it's the place where the person's at because that's where you're doing things. And I take their natal chart and the transits, and I find the best time to do things. And I use a thing I call time markers. So what time markers do is it basically is a way that I have of qualifying moments in time. And it's something that I've developed in 2020. And it's about 100 different categories to look at moments in time. And what's interesting about it is you can apply it to various things. So you can apply it, well, you can't apply it. I apply it to clock time, to the time equivalent of zodiacal position. I also apply it to transits. So, and it's a really interesting technique because the first time that I used it um, was on a photograph and it had a timestamp on it. And I was able to tell the person what they had for lunch. The interesting thing, the person ended up telling me that yes, they did in fact have that for lunch, but they only have it for lunch in that particular location. And that was the very first time I used the time marker. So it's very, very good about describing the qualities of time. It's also really useful when I'm looking at transits. That another aside. The thing with transits is a lot of times astrologers will use transits and they say that they don't work or it's not activated. And my entire practice has really been, and it's only recently that I've realized this, is looking at time. So the first technique I developed was using words and numbers uh, to read a person's subconscious mind, and then I would turn that into a future chart. So I had a formula to transform numbers or dates, sorry, numbers or words into future time. And I've been doing that since how long? Since about 2000. And the time markers I did happened in the last, I think it's about 3 years. So I've been looking at time for close to a decade, and time markers for 3 years. So what I found is that I'm able to find the time where the transit is live because I asked the person's slash subconscious, unconscious mind for a time and a date. And what's interesting about that is it's made me realize that subconsciously a person knows everything that's going to happen to them. So I use I use the numbers or the words as triggers, right? So those are triggers to help me find the date that's actually going to answer the questions that the querent has. And it's a very interesting technique, and I found that it works amazingly. I'll give you another example, and then we'll move on to the next forecast. Okay. I had a friend of mine, and he was meditating. He wanted to get rid of a specific internal uh, dynamic that he had going on, right? So he told me the times he was going to meditate, and he gave me an hour window. It might have been 2 hours. And I says, okay, I'm going to find the best time to start. So he did the meditation. I always like to get feedback when I'm testing out a project or an idea. And he gave me feedback, and he told me he had a vision. And because I chose a particular time, that time also has a chart. So when I read the chart, I was able to tell him which family member was in his vision. So it is pretty effective. And for people to say transits don't work, it's really, you might just need to know where to look. And I've been very lucky slash fortunate to find and develop techniques that allow me to find charts that are a bit more live.